In this episode, you'll hear some sensitive topics. So, with this trigger warning, if you have little ones around, please grab your headphones now.
Now, at this particular time, it's different because whatever was happening on the other side of the veil came to me. And so I could now see beside myself this gigantic angel standing there. And I was like, what is going on? Who invited this guy here? Like, how did this guy get from that reality to this reality? Like, he crossed the threshold. What's going
Mm,
on? Why are you here?
mm.
And he just like had this peaceful, calm energy, and he just looked down at me, and he was like, he just kind of took a breath, and he was like, I've come to show you the meaning of true love. And then there's like this pause, and as I'm like trying to process, like, what? Why would you need to come and tell me the meaning of true love? Like, I have a husband, I have all these kids, like, I came from a family that was, relatively fine. Like, why are you coming? I know the meaning of true love. Thanks. I think that was my response to him. I know the meaning of true love. Thanks for coming. Like, next. And he, like, just was very grounded, very anchored and angelic, right? And so he's like, no, not that meaning of love. The real source creator energy, love, like unconditional love. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, come here, let me show you. And he like took his two little hands and like scooped them under my body like I was at a wedding, like you pick up your bride. And so he scooped me up and held me into his chest, and I like melted in and relaxed, and I could feel him radiate this pink, pure love energy into my body. And I was like totally speechless. And then he like stopped, and I cried. And I was like, I definitely forgot the meaning of true love. Like, I have never felt that. And he was like,
Mm.
this is why I was sent. This is why I have come to you to show you what love is. And that is why you have that pain, because you've forgotten to stay connected to love.
Folks, this week's guest is my new friend, Natalie Nadine, registered trauma therapist, multi-dimensional channeler, and quantum healer. What led her from healing trauma as a therapist to her own spiritual awakening? You'll definitely want to tune in to hear Natalie's phenomenal story. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast, the show that empowers you to live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Benjamin Ye, and I created this podcast to give you perspectives on how to strengthen your mindset so that you can build optimal health, create aligned wealth, and connect with your higher self. It's all interconnected. Let's get to work. Welcome back to episode 85 of the Boom Vision Podcast. I feel delighted in sharing part one of today's interview with my new friend, Natalie Nadine. I was connected to Natalie through our mutual friend, Tian Mu. I remember vividly after hearing Natalie's voice in a voice memo that she left for Tian, that my intuition was telling me to connect with her and invite her on this show. As a brief background, Natalie Nadine is a registered trauma therapist, multi-dimensional channeler, and quantum healer. After 10 years working to support clients through traumatic experiences, Natalie discovered how to connect to the nervous system and locate past lifetimes. It was soon after the birth of her fourth son that Natalie had an unexpected visitor arrived and invited her into a rapid awakening process. Shortly after, Natalie began to discover she was being assigned to different tasks and called to aid with the Ascension journey in a very unique way. So without further ado, here's Natalie. Natalie Nadine, welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited for today's interview, Natalie. And so I want to just dive right in. Natalie, can you start with your origin story? Share a bit of where did it all start for you and what's led to the current path that you are on right now?
Oh, absolutely. So, my awakening journey, my journey of what led me to the place of just being able to see some of these things that people might say are on the other side of the veil. Like the veil is very thin. So, it's what really just kind of kickstarted from being a very regular 9 to 5 job. I was a trauma therapist that would go into people's homes and assist them with navigating their mental health services here in Ontario, Canada. And so would go in, I'd help them understand what was happening and connect them to a local service. So I was doing that, I'd probably been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years. And I had a pregnancy. So I have 4 boys, and this last little guy, I guess it was my second last little guy came in. So he's now 5. And what took place at that point in time was my self-worth began to grow. And I really just started to understand that I have this beautiful ability to assess cases and understand what's going on in people's lives and connect them to the right resources, and things go really well for them. And so I just kind of felt it in my body. I'm like, I can do this without having a 9 to 5 job. I could do this where I reach community partners, and these community partners and I work together, and we can just really help support more people. These are my tools. It's not like I'm a plumber and, or, somebody that's a tradesperson and has these concrete tools that they need. I have my tools of assessment, and that's something that can't be used anywhere other than by me. And so I got my own practice up and running. I became a therapist that had their private practice. Off I went. And it was one day where somebody said to me, have you ever read the book Emotion Code? You should give that a try. You should read the book Emotion Code. So I did. I thought, why not? Got it out. And I started to realize there is a pattern between accessing people's nervous systems and being able to shape the way they view things within their lives, be able to shape the trauma response that is held in their body, and really just shape it in a way that desensitizes things and allows them to function in an optimal way. And so I was pulling out these emotions. And one day, and I'd been doing that probably for almost 2 years, I did that. And one day, I started realizing within that 2 year time frame, I started just realizing I see the person in front of me on the Zoom call or in the session virtually, and but they also see off to the side, almost as if when you are watching cartoons and a bubble appears and there's a little like movie that plays in that bubble.
Mm.
I started to see something appear in that bubble, and I could see the person I'm working with and energetically connected with. I could see a whole life start to happen. And I would be like, I would watch that little bubble and I would see them like really working through one of the problems or challenges that they're identifying. And so I would tell the client, like, I see you as this, or I see you this and this and this happening, or have you ever thought this, this, and this? And I would share what I see in the bubble. And the person, time and time again, they'd be like, that really resonates. And yeah, like that sounds right. And that's accurate. And these are it mirrors so much the experiences I'm experiencing in like this current time. And so I then thought to myself, like, why don't we change and work with that little bubble that's up there? Why don't we try communicating with that little bubble and asking, like, hey, there's some things that you might want to know. Let me explain to you what the parts are that you're not seeing. So I would talk to the bubble and it would resonate with the person. And I had no idea at that time. What I was actually doing was viewing their Akashic record, where I was viewing a record of a life, a past incarnation of theirs. So I was just a regular plain Jane, doing my day-to-day life, having my sessions with my clients, and this ability to see the Akashic record unknown to me because I didn't study anything. I didn't, take a course. I just doing my sessions and these bubbles started to appear above people's heads with very,
Wow.
very clear information in them. Hmm.
Yeah. Holy cow. Wait, so how long ago was this? This was how many years ago that you had these experiences?
So this was 5 years ago that that started. That it took a little bit of time, but that I started to feel it in my body. Like when the
Yeah.
bubble would appear, I would feel this like sensation, very similar to when you're about to sneeze. So you would have like this tickle and pressure through you, and I would be like, "What's going on?" And then I would look, and I'm like, "Oh, the bubble's there," and I would then see the what's inside. So then I realized we could go in and talk to that bubble, and we could actually invite that bubble to be the main rather than the side bubble. It could come forward, and I could walk my client into what I was seeing in this bubble. And I
Hmm.
could say, like, now just imagine you're standing by a tree, and really just guided imagery is what we call it in therapy. In the spirituality side, we actually call it like a guided meditation. And so,
Hmm.
and people go a little bit another step further and they'll say like it's almost like a regressive or a hypnotic state that a person can go in, and we're accessing their subconscious, right? So
Hmm.
depending on like which modality or which stream you're coming in from, it's
Yeah.
all really the same as just your comfort level and what you've been exposed to.
Natalie, I love how you described that because so I'm sort of getting the body chills here because it tells me that we're on the right path here.
Good.
Um, you're so descriptive on how visually it landed on you and how it revealed for you. Because I think for me, I don't see bubbles next to the person, but rather it's almost like, when I'm listening to people talk and just feeling the energy of their words, it's almost like there's that mental image of like, those old school projectors that we used to have in school. And like, it's almost like there's a light that goes through the person and then it projects this image for me. And so I kind of see this like movie playing out. And it's like, oh, okay. So I'm seeing this. Does that resonate? I don't know why I'm seeing. I'm like, okay. And somehow it's like, wait, how did you know that? I don't know. I'm just, I'm just seeing this. And as I feel into it, my body will give me the sensation. And similar to what you were saying about like that feeling of sneezing, it's like for me, it's vibration, almost like a goosebump sensation, but like a vibration of my legs are like, oh, okay. Because I thought about something and something's resonating. So it's like, oh, maybe that's information that they want to, it's meant for the person I'm talking to. And so, I'm just sort of like looking back and early on when I had this started happening in this type of coaching that in a similar way. Like I didn't know, but it's just I'm feeling it, and it seems like every time I'm saying something, it always hits and resonate. And so I'm curious, Natalie, when you started having this almost as like this new ability on your dashboard unlock as you're seeing people, I love the fact that rather than being like, oh, what's going on, and being fearful of it, it feels like you approach it with such openness and curiosity, and you just kind of went with that flow rather than resisting it. And I'm curious, is it because of your upbringing or life experiences that allow you to approach it with such openness? Or because some people might be like, oh, and just easily dismiss that, saying, oh, I don't know what that warning sign is, but never mind. Like what allowed you to be in this space to accept this newfound gift that you had?
Yeah, well, my upbringing was very open. Like my parents were very open-minded. They were very, if you see it, you're free to believe it. And I was also raised in a sense where my stepdad, when he would lose things, he would sit down and meditate, and then he'll be like, I know where it is now. He would get up and go find it, and like go to the location he meditated in. So I was kind of in a space already that it was free for me to explore. And yeah, so I feel like that was a piece of it that I didn't have any negative connotations of like, if you're seeing things, you should just like, don't share that, don't tell anybody. I was brought up in a space where it's safe. And if
Mm.
you are experiencing something new, then probably should tell somebody or, and like celebrate that and talk about why it's new and how that was discovered. So I feel like I didn't have a lot of what typically happens is people have this old programming around that where they have to kind of like weed through or work through to really get to the outside scope of that, especially when it comes to religion or really having a religious background around, spirituality it's hard to navigate through sometimes.
Hmm. And the book you mentioned earlier, The Emotion Code, was that by Dr. Bradley Nelson?
Yes,
Okay, beautiful. I'm going to include that in the show notes, but I just wanted to make sure I captured it.
the
We
right
mentioned,
note,
but
yes.
but I felt like reading that book opened some gateways of sort of new ways of thinking and
Mhm.
space for things to
Yes.
flow.
Absolutely. So it was, you know how we'll say something is so synchronistic? This is very, very much one of those things. So not only did the emotion code book come in, which is based around muscle testing.
Mm,
And so when you muscle test, you access the energy field around, and you basically you just ask that energy field, and you're like, hey, how does this energy impact this person that I'm asking questions about? Or if you're asking questions about yourself, how does this energy impact me? If I stay strong while I'm asking these questions, then it's a yes. And if I feel my body go weak during these questions, then it's a no. So I was reading that about that kind of modality, I guess, or that strategy in this emotion code book. So it came up there once, and right around the same time, I had a coworker that I worked with about probably 12 years earlier, and she reached out to me and she had said, like, you got to come to this weekend course. Like, it's 2 days, you cannot miss it. This guy's flying in from California, you got to be there. And I'm like, I have this newborn baby. Like, he's going to be 2 months. Like, I
mm.
do not have childcare. I cannot just, and I already had a 3-year-old and then this brand new baby. Like,
Oh my goodness.
I don't know how I'm going to do it. But her name was Lisa, and she was like, Natalie, I am telling you, you're going to regret it if you don't come. And she was like, and I could feel it in my body. I could feel that chill that you were talking about. And I'm like, I got to be here. I just know I need to go. So I
Hmm.
called the person and I said, hey, you're going to be doing, I think I wrote them an email and I said, like, you're going to be doing this workshop. It's in my community, it's about an hour away. I have this 2-month-old baby. Like, is it gonna be too disruptive for me to bring this baby? And they were like, we welcome children. Like, just please bring your
Hmm.
baby. We welcome that. And so I was like, okay, it's meant to be. Like, I'm gonna go. So I went, and the workshop was all about, it's actually called Voila Method.
Hmm.
And the founder, his first name is Joe, and I forget his last name, but I can give it to you, and you can
Sure.
tag it in afterwards. But Joe created this idea that your body has very specific points on its system. And when you ask each point if it is balanced and feeling good, it will answer you. And you just need to
Hmm.
ask it, hey, you named this particular bones in a particular sequence, and ask these bones if they're in alignment. And these bones, when you talk to them, they'll tell you, no, I actually need to move up or down or side to side or back to front. Wherever they need to move in whatever position, they'll communicate that with you. And you just muscle test. And that's how you get the feedback. So you're getting the feedback from the person's body, and it really aligns and it releases tension within that person's physical body. And so I took that weekend course and I was like, okay, like this is magical.
Wow.
I was able to really feel the tension and be able to align things. That was my second muscle testing. Like, hey, the book said, hey, you should be
Hmm.
muscle testing about emotions. And this course said you should be muscle testing about body tension. And then I was like, wait, the body tension and the emotions actually go together. I was like, this is genius. So I that's where I started using the combination of these two to really just fall into people's past lives. Because
Wow.
people's past lives were coming up through their cellular structures, and they were
Right.
holding on to past emotions, and they were feeling pain through their bodies, but it wasn't from this lifetime. It was in past. So that was kind of the big, I took these two and it was the big like aha kind of thing.
So, with this sort of alchemy of two different modalities that you've learned and be able to share that with your therapy sessions that you're having with people, like how did that impact your practice? It feels like You were able to go from first, second to third gear, and all of a sudden you're jumping like sixth to seventh gear with this new tool in your tool shed, so to speak, right? Like
Yes.
how did that shift your way of being and how your practice is? Because that's a very powerful tool that you're talking about.
Right. And so that's a great question because I realized quickly, like, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
we
totally.
we are somewhere else and we are in a different ballpark, and I don't fit the mold for therapy in a traditional way anymore. So
Mm,
I don't fit the traditional talk therapy, and I don't fit the traditional, like, tell me how your day went and you have some anxiety and let me give you some coping strategies and grounding tools and you're good to go. Like, I realized I was digging deeper into things and really moving people. And so I also realized that not everybody believes in past lives and incarnations. So I had to separate my two businesses. So
mm,
that was the birth of now, we're now into my therapy practice is called Attuned Walk, and my
mm,
spirituality practice, it falls under divine transmissions. And so I
mm,
separated them. And
mm,
so, right at the time that they were separating, I was able to be like, okay, I am seeing a lot of online entrepreneurs. I
mm,
am like really having individuals that are starting businesses because this is right at the beginning of kind of COVID,
mhm,
COVID hitting, things shutting down, people moving into the online space and feeling like, what can I do at home? I've lost my job or I'm not going to comply to certain regulations and I actually want to move into something new. So those people were finding me, and I
mm,
almost think they were being sent, really divine, divinely sent to me. And it was really a lot of inbox messages, and me guiding through almost the images that I was seeing. And so that's when people started kind of just coming in for, startup, business startup planning, and things that they would say are like, this and this hold me back, or these are recurring patterns, or these are fears that I have, or, these are self-sabotaging patterns. And so I would be able to take the emotions and take the physical pain, look where it has repeated in the past lives, and look for the root. When I would find the root, then I would identify, like, oh, you weren't abandoned. Like, your parent left you because you were at greater risk if they stayed with you. She self-sacrificed so you could live. And that person, it totally shaped things in a different way when
yeah.
you shined a light on things, right? Like when the shadow is no longer there and the light is on, you're like, oh. And then entrepreneurs were really just blooming and telling their friends. So that's kind of how that part then started to develop, where I had divine transmissions around supporting these people getting their businesses up and running.
That's amazing. Wow. And do you find there's a commonality between the people you serve in the divine transmission branch? I almost feel like they need to have begun their spiritual journey to be open and accepting of it. Because one of the things I find it's like before I had this old paradigm of seeing is believing, right? Show me the facts, show me the data, then I'll believe it. This is very much before I began my spiritual journey. But once I began my spiritual journey, and started to understand this concept of, oh, it's believing is seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? And you could go very deep with that. It allowed me to be more open to exploring what different modalities are and what really resonates with me. Because it's not like, one size fits all. It just depends on where people are at in their journey. And so I'm wondering, going back to the blossoming of divine transmissions, did you find that there was a commonality on where people were at spiritually that allowed them to be receptive of your gift?
Yeah. It just, that's awesome. Like, it was the frequency of my voice, is what I think really brought down. They would say, like, I don't know what you said, but whatever you said, like, calmed me down. Like, it felt so much better as soon as you started speaking. In fact, it felt so much better. I don't remember what you said. Can you say that again? And I'd be like, I don't think I said anything too magical. Like, like, let me think about what I just said. And I would say it again, and they're like, I think it's just your voice holds something really powerful and it relaxes my body. And so, that was really the meat and potatoes is people came in and they felt better. And
Mm.
so that was the beginning of them believing because they knew when they came in, they felt good, whatever it was
Yeah.
what was happening. We also kind of have the same saying in the therapy side. It's less about the modality and I think it's like 10% the modality you use and 90% the relationship you have. And so
Mm.
therapy is actually based on relationship. And so
Mm.
there's a lot of overlap, but it's just worded differently and labeled
Yeah.
differently. And so, yeah, I feel like a lot of it came from the frequencies I held. And once they
Mm.
realized this makes me feel good, I don't really know what it's called that you're doing, but I'm going to keep coming back because it's something's working. So I've had very, very deep rooted Christian individuals come in on the spiritual side sort of by accident.
Mm.
But I guess there's no accident. So
Yeah.
this individual came in, she was an entrepreneur. She really wanted to get her business going. She had been trying and trying and trying all different things for years, brought so much like tech and decked her stuff out and, just really believed I have to fake it till I make it because I have to
Mm.
stay motivated and I have to really anchor into my why and I have to really just keep plugging away every day. And I'm like, why are you making this so hard, man? Like, if you're not loving it, you're not going to want to stick with it. And so for her changing and her really softening, when that happened, it was when she could really picture it. So
Mm.
I would do guided meditations with her and we didn't really call it guided meditations. It was more like, hey, can you picture something for me? You've been able to picture yourself as a successful entrepreneur. Now let's picture yourself. And I would just guide through the bubbles that I would see.
Yeah.
And she would be like, wow, like this is so restful and so peaceful. And it was really slowly shifting her system.
Mm.
And she was really absorbing and embodying and integrating the essences of herself that she
Mm.
had sort of lost along the way. It was on the trauma side, we would say she was just moving through childhood trauma. On the spirituality side, we would say she was doing childhood healing, like the inner child
Mm.
healing. She was just really finding herself. And there really wasn't a part of me that was labeling the modality and saying like now we're going to
Mm.
do quantum shifting and now we're like we I just moved with whatever I felt was needed to support her system at the time.
Yeah.
And so it beautifully just opened up as
Yeah.
she felt better and better.
I love that. I like the point you just made in that it's not necessarily needed to label, oh, what technique I'm using or what modality I'm using. It's almost like the picture I see is being in a kindergarten room and you're with a kindergarten child and they want to play but you know which kind of toys will bring out the joy in them. So it's just putting it in front of them and just letting them they themselves do the magic, but you don't need to know exactly what toy it is. It's just, intuitively you'll just know, oh, this is what you need, or this is what's been missing, because they're so in it in that moment that they're not going to be able to see or feel or sense things that you are able to. Wow. Okay.
Absolutely.
So as you came into this place in your life where you're able to make the distinction between the therapy and divine transmission, how did that evolve for you in that it feels like these gifts are expanding and opening up in a very gentle way, it sounds like. It doesn't seem like it was very aggressive or abrupt, but it's just like, hey, when you're ready for it, like it's almost like another door opens,
Yes.
right? And so I want to go, maybe one level deeper in a sense of, when I listen to you, and maybe this is just more of a question I feel the audience might have in their mind, which is like, what's the difference between channeling versus, this interpretation of the images that you're seeing play out?
Mm,
Curious what
yes.
comes to you and maybe helping to have a better distinction between the two.
Yeah, so I'll start at the next door that opened because my entrepreneur divine transmissions took another step
Mm,
when I got pregnant again. I was ready to have my fourth child. I was doing my like blended alchemy of the two modalities. And along comes this like fourth baby, completely unexpected. It's like middle of COVID, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we did not expect. We felt very complete at three children. We were not expecting number four. Very unprepared. Maybe that would be the word. And so very blessed and thankful, but very like, oh my gosh, like we are already tapped out with resources and feeling overwhelmed. And now this new baby is coming. And so he arrives, and I end up with this pain that is kind of like to the right of my chest and up into my shoulder a little bit. And it like begins to ache. And the older my baby gets and the farther from delivery day I get, the more I'm like, why hasn't this resolved itself?
Mm,
Like, I'm 2 months postpartum now. Like, I should not have this pain in my chest or sort of to the side of my chest. Like, what is this? And because you know that emotions are tied with the feeling, and I'm like, is this an emotion? Can I clear it? How does this work? And I kept getting no, don't clear it. No, it cannot be cleared. Is it a chakra? No, it's not a chakra. No, it can't be cleared. And I'm like, okay, it's getting worse. Somebody needs to come fix this. I am sick of it. We're done. So I like get in a bath, and I've like already kind of like stood my ground and been like, this is the last day for this. And get in my bath. I'm soaking in Epsom salt. I'm like, right? Very frustrated, but I'm trying
mm,
to relax. And I suddenly get this feeling that I'm not alone. Like I'm not in this bathroom alone. And I like happen to look from my bubble, and I look up to the right. And since like up to that point in time, I had always noticed the bubble for a client and gone to where I could see this experience happening in the bubble. Now, at this particular time, it's different because whatever was happening on the other side of the veil came to me. And
mm,
so I could now see beside myself this gigantic angel standing there. And I was like, what is going on? Who invited this guy here? Like, how did this guy get from that reality to this reality? Like, he crossed the threshold. What's going
mm,
on? Why are you here?
mm.
And he just like had this peaceful, calm energy, and he just looked down at me, and he was like, he just kind of took a breath, and he was like, I've come to show you the meaning of true love. And then there's like this pause, and as I'm like trying to process, like, what? Why would you need to come and tell me the meaning of true love? Like, I have a husband, I have all these kids. Like, I came from a family that was, relatively fine. Like, why are you coming? I know the meaning of true love. Thanks. I think that was my response to him. I know the meaning of true love. Thanks for coming. Like, next. And he like just was very grounded, very anchored and angelic, right? And so he's like, no, not that meaning of love. The real source creator energy love, like unconditional love. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, come here, let me show you. And he like took his two little hands and like scooped them under my body like I was at a wedding, like you pick up your bride. And so he scooped me up and held me into his chest, and I like melted in and relaxed, and I could feel him radiate this pink, pure love energy into my body. And I was like totally speechless. And then he like stopped, and I cried. And I was like, I definitely forgot the meaning of true love. Like, I have never felt that. And he was like,
Mm.
this is why I was sent. This is why I have come to you to show you what love is. And that is why you have that pain, because you've forgotten to stay connected to love. And I was like, I don't even know this thing existed. Like,
Wow. Okay, I feel like I'm feeling what you felt then. But so when you had this conversation and going through this experience, then did the pain just immediately like dissipate or go away or?
it slowly began to lift. The
Mm,
pain felt like it was almost like a bruise, but
mm,
also like a very strong ache that wouldn't go away. It's almost like when you have a knot in something in your back, maybe, and it would just get more knotted and more tension and tighter, and it was just getting
Yeah.
bigger and worse. So that's what it felt like. And
Yeah.
then it just started to loosen and slowly lift in the days to come
Right.
away. So he continued and to let me know why he also needed to continue to keep coming. So he told me that he was sent because, yes, I've forgotten unconditional love, but I also need to follow him. And so in my mind's eye, he walked across my bathroom and I kind of already knew there was a bit of a portal that was open in my like in my bathroom. My 3-year-old would toddle over there and he would like stand and stare and I'd be like, what's he staring at? And I would tune in and I'd be like, oh, he's looking through into somewhere else. So I knew there was kind of a portal there. So this angel went, he stood in the portal space and he was like, follow me. So he went through, and as you kind of walked through in my mind's eye, like he opened this doorway, and when we went in, it was very cloudy, like smoggy and, yeah, smoky appearing. And so as it settled and I adjusted, I could see we were basically what people describe as in the kingdom. We were, it had the like big white pillars that like go on and upward forever and ever. And it was very open, but yet you knew you were contained in something. And when it all settled, I could see that I was standing at the beginning of an aisle, almost like when a bride walks down an aisle, you stand at the beginning of this aisle. And I remember like being almost frozen and like my eyes tilted upward and to the right. And I looked at the angel and I was like, where are we? And he was like, this is the kingdom of life. This is the beginning of life. This is the entrance of life. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And he was like, this is where you come for when you have life. And I'm like, am I dying? And he's like, no, you're living. And I'm like, why are you showing me this? And he's like, he motioned for me to just like stop with the craziness, stop with the questions, and just be in the moment. So he was like, he just kind of like motioned to stand still. So I'm standing still. I'm still waiting for things to settle. And then I realize the aisle actually is lined with angels on either side for as far as you can see. There's these white, tinier angels than the big white and yellow one that's with me. And so I'm like looking at all these angels and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is like nothing I've ever experienced or felt. And I'm like, no words. Finally, it like settles a little bit so I can speak. And I'm like, why is there so many angels? Like, why so many angels? And he's like, these are your angels. And I'm like, okay, now we're like in La La Land. Like, what? Why are these my angels? How did they get to be my angels? Like, I now know that this has got to be fantasy because I don't own anything. And I'm like, well, how did they get to be my angels? And he was like, well, why don't you ask? And I'm like, well, I don't talk angel. Like, I don't know how to talk to angels. And he's like, sure you do. You just have forgotten. So just open your mouth and speak. And I was like, oh, okay, like, let me prove this guy wrong because clearly he doesn't know me. So I opened my mouth to say, I don't know what you're talking about. And all this angelic music came out of my mouth. Like it was just pure energy of angels. And it just was like the sound echoed through the space. And as that happened, all the angels turned and looked at me. And it like took my breath away and I was like, I was like, they're looking at me. And he's like, yeah. And as they did that, they like bowed their head and kind of like curtsied a little bit or like dropped one knee a little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And he's like, they are bowing in gratitude for the work that you do. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Okay. Like I'm still trying to get my bearings and not freak out. And I'm like, okay, so it's a lot of angels. Like, why so many angels? And he's like, well, that brings us to our next thing that we need to talk about. And I'm like, okay, like I'm just waiting for you to tell me that I need to die and you're gonna bring me back, or like some like when you start seeing angels and you've never seen them before, you really just start thinking the end is near. It must be.
Hmm.
Because this is like what you see in movies when angels appear and then they just transition you. So that was kind of where I was at some point. I was kind of just waiting for him to drop the shoe and be like, okay, so now you're never going back and you're going to stay here forever and you're going to forget your family and kids and we'll just keep moving along. So I was kind of half expecting that to be the next kind of step,
Hmm.
but that was not how it went. So what he said was, I've been asked to come and ask you if you would like to step into working mode. Like, are you ready to start working? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, you are a servant and you need to figure out if you're going to serve on earth or if you're going to serve here in the kingdom and on this side. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. When you say work, I don't really know what the definition of like what that's going to entail. And I don't know about any type of side. So I'm like very new and green and I have no idea what you're talking about. And he's like, let me show you. And I'm like, okay, like, sure, why not? So he told me he would be back. And I'm like, okay. So the next day he came back and he was like, oh, I'm just checking to see if you've decided if you're staying on Earth or if you're coming back with me. And I was like, oh, I remember that radiating feeling of love and I want to go back. Like it
Hmm.
feels so good there and back in the kingdom with all those angels. Like that just feels so good.
Hmm.
And I'm like watching him as he shows me in the bubble of what that is going to look like. And I'm like, deal. Like that sounds like such a good deal. I'm like, do I have to sacrifice anything? Do I have to like give, is this a deal? Like you give me this and I get something else back. Like, what are we doing here? And he's like, no, you would permanently be there always. And I'm like, okay, but what about like my life here and my new baby? Like I have 4 kids. They're not very old. So what's the
Hmm.
plan for that? And he's like, let me show you what that life would look like if you were not part of that life.
Hmm.
And so he showed me laying in a bed, and I'm in a hospital bed, and my husband is coming beside the hospital bed, and the nurse is talking to him about how I'm not going to wake up. Like that's the end. He needs to make some like medical decisions and figure things out for their lives moving forward. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I cannot leave my husband to make all those decisions and raise all those kids. And I was like,
Hmm.
stop, stop, stop. Like that, we can't pick this. This is not the right route. I need to go
Hmm.
back and like be part of working while staying. And he was like, okay, that's all right. That is allowed. That's like perfectly fine. You have the choice. The choice is yours. And I'm like, you're not going to trick me into something. And he's like, no, no, no. You have sacred contracts that allow you to go back and still be a mom and do the work, and you will be supported. And part of the support will be the angels coming to help work with you. And I was like, oh. And I was like, out of curiosity, how did I get in that medical state? And he was like, oh, you actually would have had a really bad car accident. So he showed me pulling up to the stop sign, looking both ways and crossing, and a car comes out of nowhere and just like bangs into and crashes into my car. And then I'm airlifted and sent to the hospital, and that's when my husband comes to my bedside. And so I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. I'm like, so wait, I can see you, but what if I could not see you? Like, I've done this work for a few years prior where I've been able to see what's in the bubble, right? So, like, I'm thankful I could see you and you could come to me and we could have this discussion without having to be in this medical state. And he's like, yeah, like, essentially, if you couldn't see me, you would have had the car accident and been in a coma, and we would have come to you at that point in time, and we would have asked you if you would like to stay or go. And I was like, well, I'm glad we avoided that. And he's like, yeah, I am glad we avoided that. You have permission to start your training whenever you choose. And I'm like, you're not going to trick me and try to take me anyway. I had this fear around them just taking me anyway.
Hmm.
And they were like, no, no, no. Like, you've done this many times and had many sacrifices where you didn't get to be a mom. So the condition this time in coming back to Earth, part of your contract in coming back was that you would get to ride out the life as a mom without us pulling you back. And
Mm.
so he's like, that was my question. If you want to stay and be the mom, it's granted. And I was like, oh, okay. And that very day, so that would have been like the evening, that like the second evening. So when I woke up, I was supposed to go to a visit. So some of my trauma work was in the homes of individuals, and I would always go by myself because it's work. So I was scheduled that day to go out to somebody's home and just visit them and check in and do my stuff. But the lady called me. It was like 10 in the morning or something. She's like, you know, I'm a school teacher and I am so far behind. I did not realize there was parent interviews this week and I like cannot make it home in time for our appointment tonight. So I'm going to have to reschedule. And I was like, "Huh, okay." And I smiled because I'm like, that would have been the time where I was driving by myself. And the time that I
Mm.
drove by myself would have been the accident time. And
Mm.
they were, now that I made a decision, they were canceling their part and allowing me to stay.
Wow. There's so many rabbit holes we can go on that one,
Yeah.
Natalie. I'm curious, when you're in that hallway and you're seeing the angels and the words that came out of your mouth was like a completely foreign language for you that speaks to the angels. One, it feels like there's that initial surprise of like, oh my God, I didn't know I actually had this language within me. But I'm wondering as you were saying it, did almost a switch turn on where you actually understood what you're saying, or was it still foreign to you? You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
imagine your whole life you've been speaking English, and all of a sudden you're in Italy and you just start speaking Italian. I'm like, is it just a knowing that just hits you where, oh, I actually do understand it once I was able to speak it, or like, what was that process like for you?
It was, if you've ever, when you have balloons and some of them are filled with helium and some of them are not, and you don't really know which is which, when you throw a regular air-filled balloon, it should just go up at the right pace and come back down. When you have a
Right.
helium balloon, it was very similar to me speaking angelic, like this different frequency that came out of me. It's like you let go of the balloon thinking like it's a regular air balloon and it floats up and you're like, it's not coming back down. Like, what's going on here? Like, gravity laws say it should come back down, but yet it went up. And so it's like this whole mind, like, what is going on? Like a law, a universal law that I knew to be true suddenly was shattered in that moment of like,
Mm.
I can speak to other beings and they understand me. And not only did they understand me, but whatever came out of me, I was aware of whatever it was. Like,
Mm.
I was like, I am basically saying, like, I'm here. Like, and this sound came out. I'm like,
Mm.
whoa. And I immediately just knew these were my angels. And
Yeah.
I know, like, it's so crazy.
Wow. Now, from that journey and coming back, and you mentioned the following day, that's when your big angel came back and asked you, do you want to stay or do you want to work on the other side, right? I'm
Mm,
curious from those moments forward, because it's almost like that helium balloon that you realize that defied what you perceived as the law of gravity no longer is the truth because,
hmm.
oh, that's
Shattered.
filled, it is completely shattered. How did your energy shift going forward? Because I have to imagine it did shift. You know what I mean? Like just in terms of your day-to-day life, your like what shifted for you in that?
This was essentially my rebirth part. This is where people go through the like everything I've known to be true that has kept me safe is like, what? Gravity doesn't exist in other places? And I'm here on Earth in the same place, but yet these universal rules and laws that I know to be true are not. Like, wow. So my husband actually, I told him about what took place with the angel in the best version that I could explain it to him because he's, not. as intuitive and working with energy and aware as I was at that time. So I explained it to him that, I was supposed to have a car accident, but there's been this intervention and not to worry because I'm not having the car accident anymore. And he actually began to worry that there was something wrong and that I needed some support because if I'm seeing things and hearing things and rules that I knew to be true were no longer true, he was like, I go to work every day and leave you with these children. Like, and you're postpartum by a couple months. Like, I really think I need to be worried and watching you a little bit more
Oh.
closely
Hmm.
because is this like something significant in terms of mental health that's happening? So he became very worried. And, since that point in time, we've worked through and he's got a better understanding of what's happening. And it's me watching him as milestone markers for me to navigate through as well, so that I'm not stressing and worrying him too much.
Hmm.
But essentially, yeah, that changed my life where I immediately, once I made the decision of I'm staying here on earth, I'm not going to be taken, I'm going to start working. The angel had said to me, the reason why we're coming to you now to have you initiate starting the work is because the universal rules of spirituality and keeps people safe they're being broken, and so we need you to uh, come in and start working. So I was like, I don't know what that means. He's like, well, your training starts immediately. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, awesome. Like, no sense worrying about what my training's going to be and starting 2 weeks from now. Like, let's just get it on the go, right? Like, so he took me back to the kingdom. We're in there, and the floor, like, it's like this panoramic floor, and it just has two sides to it, and it like opens, and we're suspended above this open space. And he says to me, pay attention, like this is serious, like you need to really focus and be present. And I was like, okay, like, yep. So I'm watching the floor, like watching, and basically it's like we're a drone and we're hovering over the world, like Earth. And I'm watching as I'm hovering over top, and he's with me, and we're like watching. And I'm like, all I see is trees. And he's like, yep, keep watching. So I'm like watching some more, and I'm like, these are trees I've never really seen before. Like they're not Canadian trees. And I'm like, okay, we're not in Canada. Like, okay, well, whatever. We're still watching. And I noticed it was fall, and but the tree, there was this one specific tree that looked very green, and it was an evergreen tree. And I was like, why does it look so different? It's really standing out. I'm like, okay. And we kept, for whatever reason, circling around this very specific tree. And I'm like, wow, they really want me to know about this tree. Like, well, I think they can move on, really. Like, they're drilling it in. We can move on. Anyways, it ends, the roof closes, and he's like, that's it for training. I'm like, that was it? You want me to see a tree? Like, that's lame. Like, okay, well, whatever. I thought this was like some kind of higher energy training or whatever, and no, we got trained out to be a drone and fly around and find trees. Okay, awesome. So I kind of kept my sense of humor with things, but it was later that day that somebody sent me a link to a missing person that it became like very real, very fast. And I became aware of what it's like to be energetically connected to my mission. And it is so, it feels like you drank 15 coffees, you can't stop, you can't sleep, you look mantic, like you look like something's very wrong with that person over there. So that was my experience to my first case.
Wow. Okay. Holy cow. So I guess they were just showing you where
Mm-hmm.
okay. Oh my goodness. And that's an interesting point you said about the 15 coffees because it's like to break it down for my audience, this is what I'm seeing and sensing. It's like if your body is used to a energetic capacity of like a tumbler, right? Like, coffee cup, whatever it is. But then this newfound gift you have is really like the size of a swimming pool.
Mm.
There's a swimming pool amount of water does not fit into a tumbler, but it doesn't just happen overnight. So that kind of capacity is almost like putting your probably your body, your nervous system almost on overdrive, which makes it feel as if you've
Right.
taken 15 shots of Red Bull or like coffee or whatever it is,
Yes.
right?
Yes, it was incredibly intense. And that's where my husband was like, I need to help you. Like, you are not sleeping, you're not eating, you're like
Ooh.
still functioning in the day. How are you functioning in the day as well as in the night? Like, oh, what are we doing?
And keep in
So
mind, you're like, for my audience too, you're a mother of four, right?
yeah.
And this is all happening. This is a lot to be juggling. Okay, so with that first experience, like, how did this unfold for you? Because it's that's a lot to,
Mm.
it's almost like, day one, because it's already this much going on. Yeah, so how does that unfold for you in the following days, weeks, months?
Yeah, like I was assigned different mission tasks like this in order for me to expand and grow. Each time I did a mission, I learned new things. So in that missing person case, I learned you don't operate on this 3D plane where you're calling people to say like, "Can I know where this person is? I know what to help you and assist you." And like that's not the right way, at least for me at that point in time. It wasn't what they wanted me to do and learn. So I
Oh,
had to start learning about how to use the angels, how to use my own energy without it feeling like I drank 15 coffees. I had
right.
to start learning how to ground properly, how to like tell my angels to pause. Hold on. Like, I have a kid screaming at me and I cannot listen to you right now. Like, you're going to have to wait until until there's not like I'm
Mm,
not overloaded
mm,
by the 3D world happening. So I
mm,
had to really learn how to set parameters, how to delegate tasks, how to communicate with my kids, teach my kids how to communicate with me because what my kids were doing, they would say, "Mom, mom, mom," and they would be on repeat, but I wasn't answering. And so
ah,
they would keep on. And so I realized like they're not answering because I'm not looking at them. And I'm not looking at them because I'm like somewhere else doing something else. So my kids had this habit of saying mom a couple times and then coming and getting like their face right into my face and locking eyes with me. And
mm,
so they got really good at just being able to be like, my mom is not it like present. And so they would come in and like speak into my face and it would be really annoying. I'd be like, why are you like so close and what's going on? Then I caught on like, oh, that's how they're getting me to come back. And my husband saying like, how much time are you spending elsewhere doing other things? Like, are you in this realm a lot or are you in the other realm a lot? Like doing check-ins on me and like really helping me understand like you can't be in 5D land 80% of the time. Like it feels
mm.
good for you to be there, but it's not healthy for us as a family. The balance is out. And
Yeah,
so I have to really start to balance things and learn how to balance things and learn what feels good for my body. Because
yeah.
when I'm in 5D doing all kinds of like mission work, there are hormones that are released that make me feel so good. It feels great. So you want to do it more. It's like a drug. Like you want to do that more. It's very addictive. And so you have to like, and it's also like a puzzle, like because a lot of mine is solving challenges or
Hmm.
mediating conflicts. So it feels like having to put a good puzzle that you're about to put the last few pieces together and then you have to walk away from it. That doesn't feel good, like for us as humans. So I had to really just work with my team. It also was depleting my natural rhythm hormonally. And after
Mm,
having a baby, your hormones are supposed to come back in and reset themselves to a normal baseline. Well, mine were not doing that because I had this energy coming through that I wanted to continue to like never unplug from. And my thyroid started burning out. And so
mm,
I started having like significant thyroid issues. And
mm,
I started seeing like the 3D doctor, and he's like, okay, so it's burning out. Like that, like, what do you want me to do about it? It's not burnt out, so we don't have medication for you, but it is burning out. So we can speed that process up for you. And I was like, hell no, no, thank you. Like, I'm going to just go back to my angel team and ask them to figure like we need to sit as a team and figure out how to make this work because I need to function as a human as well as do the work for you.
mm.
And part of the condition was I get to be a mom first, and you need to like respect that. And they're like, we're respecting that, but we're just doing the jobs you ask. Like, we are part of your team. And so if you haven't given us any directions, then we don't really know what you want us to do. And
Mm,
so I had to just be really clear in being like, okay, this is when you can communicate with me. This is when you cannot communicate with me. So when I'm
mm,
having my bath in the evening, you can send whoever wants to talk to me during that time. When I am waking up in the morning, you can send whoever you want to talk to me. In the times like I'm driving, or there's different times that different things can happen. So there was a clear understanding at that point, and things started to stabilize.
I love that. Well, so first of all, I have to give credit where credit is due. I just want to have a big shout out to your husband and your kids. Because honestly, like, if you think about your transition of these newfound gifts that are unfolding almost like day to day, for them to be receptive and understanding, I can easily see a scenario where a partner or kids might feel like, oh my God, like I've lost my mom or dad because I can't even recognize them anymore, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is to enroll them on this new journey that you're on because you're almost in this higher frequency, but to let them know that no, I'm still here. This is a priority, and for them to do in a way where it doesn't feel like they're adverse to it, but rather like, okay, I'm just gonna go with that flow. So I just want to give a shout out to them because I feel like that could have gone a very different way too if they weren't receptive of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I could see there was times that my husband was on the verge of that, like, you are going to force me into a position I don't want to put us in, right?
Mm,
Like I could see that he is like, I don't want to give you an ultimatum where I'm like going to be off work and I'm going to have to become the main caregiver,
mm,
or have you assessed, right? So he was sort of like, I had to learn to watch him and like to watch his eyes and to really pay attention to when his system is going to start to ask me to do something different, because I nobody likes to be told what to do or given ultimatums. So like if I can get to a place where I can self-monitor before he is asking me to, then it works much better. So I really just tuned into his system to see, okay, like he looks a little stressed out and he looks a little bit like
yeah.
this isn't going well.
Mm,
So I
mm,
need to like probably move this into like 3D a little bit more
yeah.
until things move past. But also communicating and letting him know like we've gone through some crazy stuff where our house was invaded by dark entities and things, right? Like, and he's just been like, something's happening over there. You need to go figure out what is happening over there because something's happening.
It's almost like one day you're living your day-to-day life in your house that you haven't for however many years, and all of a sudden it becomes like, Ghostbusters HQ of like, wait, what's going on here? What just
Yeah.
activated? How do I turn it off? Like I could see
Yes.
that being a very roller coaster of emotions that
Yeah.
my family had to go through. Wow. I really hope you enjoyed hearing this first half of our interview with Natalie today as much as I have. As Natalie continues to share enriching details of her journey, I felt it was best to create two parts to this interview. I will drop part two next week on Wednesday, October 16th. If there's one takeaway I can share in this part one, I'll leave you with this quote. There is no greater power in heaven or on earth than pure, unconditional love. The nature of the God force, the unforeseen intelligence in all things, which causes the material world and is the center of both the spiritual and physical plane, is best described as pure, unconditional love. This quote was by Wayne Dyer. If you enjoyed today's interview, please share this interview with who you feel can resonate with Natalie's story. Please subscribe to this Boom Vision podcast if you want to thrive together. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself, be in delight, be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjamiNyeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.